Hello again, everybody, and welcome to yet another edition of the Generally Speaking podcast. As always, we are located in the podcast studio of WVHC-FM on the beautiful campus of Herkimer County Community College. Today, we have another faculty member guest from our esteemed faculty group. We have with us Assistant Professor Grace Ashline, who teaches in the Community Health and Human Services curriculum here at the college. And we'd like to welcome Grace to our program.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
You said some very complimentary things off camera about the very lovely podcast studio we're in.
It's amazing.
It's really a nice little treasure, and it's really been, I think, for me in this podcast, and hopefully for our students, a nice resource to be able to create content that will be something people want to see.
I'm very impressed. May want to stay here.
All right, then. Impressed. So I usually start this off by saying something like, how'd you find yourself here at Herkimer County Community College? Like me, as I understand, you are not a native of the Central New York area, but you are here. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you find yourself teaching here.
Yeah, so my background is actually parallels a lot of our students, actually. I started off seeking my associates in human services. I share with students all the time that I flunked out of college 3 times. And it was actually a professor, a writing professor, who pulled me aside, took enough time to kind of probably observed that, why does she keep coming back and then she's not going to class and then she's failing. That pulled me aside and went the extra mile and said, you're a really good writer. And I thought, I wasn't used to hearing anything positive. So instantly she got my attention. And she really, I attribute to the fact that she really changed the whole trajectory of my life at the time. I was on a really downward spiral path. I didn't come from an affluent financial family. I went through a lot of adversity. So I chose to pursue my associates in human services. And then I went on to get my bachelor's with a dual major in criminal justice and sociology. And during that time period, I had a great opportunity from a mentor who I had met at the time through this professor, and started working with the Law, Order, and Justice Center and was responsible for court mediation and conflict resolution with adolescents. And that was kind of the beginning point of my career. And then from there, I had an opportunity to, with a scholarship, go and continue with some certifications that I had gotten at the time, and stumbled upon a nonprofit prevention program working with adolescents who are at risk of compulsory treatment. So anything from detention to adoption to foster care to residential treatment facilities. And a large part of the adolescents we were serving had committed adult crimes and were heavily involved in gangs at the time. So I worked there for about 6 years and worked my way up and became a director of the program and was in charge of the Albany County and 3 boroughs of New York City at the time, and loved it. And then kind of took a little bit of a pivot and decided to pursue my master's in clinical social work, and then went on to Colorado to specialize with felons who were displaced and trying to seek an alternative rehabilitation program using horses in psychotherapy.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So before we even called it trauma, we didn't know that that's really what it was. We didn't really have a name for it at the time. It was very much trauma-informed based. And then from there, I was sought out to oversee a federally funded incarceration program for children and families who had lost a loved one to incarceration. Loved the position, and then I had my firstborn and instantly went into a daycare center and cried the whole way out and said, I can't do this. 3 kids later, still left my career and was doing things intermittently. I was still providing counsel part-time, and then I had a dean at an institution who approached me and knew about, kind of she was kind of progressive at that time, and said, wow, you do trauma work. Why aren't you teaching? And I thought...
Had you not thought about teaching at all?
Never. I mean, I had done I've been asked to teach at local institutions, but more about what I was doing in the field. Yeah. Never full time, nor was that ever, I think, for, similarly to a lot of students, you don't really know what's out there until somebody either mentors, suggests, or kind of encourages you to do it. I just never even thought that was in my wheelhouse.
I'd like to go back to that professor that convinced you to maybe stick it out. Fourth time was a charm.
Yes.
And you hadn't really, what clicked for you then, other than the encouragement from that person? What clicked for you that made you decide that maybe pursuing higher education was going to work out?
I was seen.
Yeah.
I was seen.
Yeah.
Somebody thought enough of me.
Right.
To see that I was not acting out because I didn't care.
Right.
I didn't have anybody that was caring. Mm-hmm. And she went the extra mile and said, wow, your writing is incredible, but it's clearly coming out of something a little deeper here.
So here you are teaching classes. How much overlap is there with the work that you were doing in the past outside of the classroom, outside of the formal higher ed classroom, and what you're doing now? How much overlap is there? How much do you draw from that experience?
A lot. So this is my 25th year working in the field, and I still work in the field simultaneously with my job here. And I have to say, going back to your earlier question, at the time when I started off adjuncting, I didn't even know about Herkimer College because, again, I wasn't from here. Right. I had lived in between Albany and New York City for, I think 7 years at that point. And it was, I have to give Dr. Robin Riker her credit. She actually sought me out and I think knew the parallels between teaching what I particularly teach and how much of that really is vetted in program development, grant work, nonprofit is all about networking, all about community relationship building. And, by the second interview, I was like, okay, I guess, something's gnawing at me here. There must be something here. And that was how I did. I remember going up the hill still almost 9 years ago. And I still say this to this day. I go, it is the most beautiful campus. And if you're not from here, I remember going up the hill thinking, how did I never know this even was here? I mean, what a gorgeous campus.
That's a really similar experience that a lot of us have the first time we come up here. And I'll share with you, when I came up for my interview in 1990, I had the same reaction. I was driving up from my home in Pennsylvania for the interview, and it was one of these days in May. It was 78 degrees, and the sky was cobalt blue, and it was perfect. And I thought, wow, this is really paradise. Central New York. Who knew that the weather could be so nice? And I came up the hill, looked out at the valley, and said, it's really so beautiful here. And the weather varies.
Yes, it does.
But we have adapted. So you are not only teaching in the curriculum, but you are the advisor of a club.
Yes. So I'm really excited because it kind of parallels some recent changes within the program. So we've had what was previously named the Human Services Club. That's now the Community Health and Human Services Club. And it's really, I have to give it, again, credit to our students. I'm just there to help them work through barriers, but they really have the vision. They're the ones that identify whether it's a social justice issue, a community partnership that's in need, something that correlates some of the mission behind the program. And this year is another year where our students have, decided to partner with Evelyn House. Yeah. A large percentage of the displaced mothers and children are fleeing domestic violence or sex trafficking or some really traumatic scenarios. And they're there with their kids. Mm-hmm. So they, on their own volition, said, what could we do? And, on their own accord, contacted the director and said, what do you need? And, they're doing a phenomenal job. So that is great for them to also see that outside of textbook, this is what community building and networking and social justice is doing that work outside of just academia and reading about it. And then we also have an opportunity, which a lot of students have now actively been invited to participate in, I'm the chair of the Community Health and Human Services Advisory Board. Mm-hmm. That used to be just the Tri-County area here. And now I'm really excited because this is something positive that came out of COVID, mm-hmm. where Yes, exactly. Where some of us that are not technologically savvy, hence why I think this is incredible to see here and how the podcast even works behind the scenes, is we were able to look at it and say, oh my gosh, all these contacts that I have throughout the state, I couldn't get them here before, but now we can meet virtually. And now this opens up the floodgates for our students, our partnerships, kind of our stamp with what we're doing, so that, you know, a lot of even other institutions contact me and say, how do you have a trauma class for an associate's program? How do you have, and now we can share that.
I will always say that I'd rather be in a classroom with people and look them straight in the eye face to face and them at me than to do so over distance learning or whatever we call it nowadays. But it really has opened up a tremendous number of opportunities. And just a few years ago, you know, I had never been in a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting. And now we do it all the time regularly. If you want to collaborate with somebody or just see them and talk to them and they've got a computer, you can do it.
Yes.
Really quite an amazing technology. And I wanted to ask you a question about 25 years you've worked in this field.
Yes.
Right? More or less. So what are some of the changes you've seen in the mental health challenges, especially in the realm of our students? Because here you are working primarily with this population of students. What are some of the mental health challenges that have changed or evolved over that period of time? Not necessarily for better or for worse, but what's changing or what has changed? Did COVID make it all worse?
No. What I will say to that, and I love this question, so thank you for asking it, because I think what COVID did was COVID almost put a magnifying glass on what a lot of us already knew to be true.
Interesting.
And in trauma, we call COVID is an example of collective trauma. The only thing that changes, collective trauma means that nobody was exempt from it. So I think for folks in our field, it was like finally people understand that it cuts across every race, gender, sexuality, you know, religion, creed, all of that. It really doesn't discriminate. And I think prior to COVID, people just saw trauma as kind of episodic, whether it was just, you know, one episode of it or chronic trauma. And I think now with mental health, what has made us a little bit excited is that it has allowed a broader discussion where it's not just community health and human services students seeking to heal their inner wounds, which is a huge stigma and misconception and misrepresentation of students and even professionals in the field. But that one of the things I'm seeing now more than ever is even if I'm teaching a course, you know, that's specific to the degree, but I'm teaching even gen ed courses, if I'm teaching a psych or sociology courses, that I'm having more and more students come up hungry to be seen, hungry to have a conversation that isn't going to be part of TikTok, isn't going to be on the dorm room, isn't something that maybe culturally they even have language for in their homes. And then because of COVID, we know that suicide, addiction, mental health, and even just the displacement within the home has changed in epic proportions. And I think that has lent itself to students that are needing connection now more than ever. They don't, you know, if they were struggling before, the only change that we see with COVID is that they had a chronic trauma where now for 5 years, they were without some of those stable supports and even conversations to keep it, you know, it's unnatural to be that disconnected. We come out of the womb needing connection, and here we are saying, but we want you to, you know, get through your academics and thrive when you're disconnected.
Right.
It's there. If anything, I say, you know, to students, and even in my conversations off campus, in the work that I do, that if anything, the world has now woken up. It's just our job to understand that they were responding healthy to a maladaptive expectation. Whatever way that was, that, you know, other people were judging, they were doing the best they could with an extraordinary circumstance that historically we've never seen before. And that has really changed a lot of what I've seen in terms of mental health. Still the stigma, of course, still some of the resistance, but I think that students are willing and more hungry for conversations where it's a part of the discussion. You can't do, right? It's almost like saying to somebody, I want you to run a marathon and I want you to do it with an injury, and you have to do it within a certain amount of time. And if you don't do it, then we don't want you back.
Right.
You can't do academics without wellness. You can't. It will never work that way.
I'm still going back to your characterization of COVID as being good, because you described it as a collective trauma. And it really opened the eyes of so many of us to the inconveniences that many of us felt, or, the really dire situations that it cast us in. But it was kind of a communal feeling because it was all happening simultaneously, and we had the same restrictions placed upon us throughout society. And so in that light, teaching what you teach and working with the people that are here on campus, do you find it a burden or a challenge or exhilarating? Because you are teaching in this realm where people now can open up because these topics are out there in the open and they're discussed in the classroom and elsewhere. Do you find that to be overwhelming or just a wonderful challenge to then be able to have those conversations with people?
Excellent question.
I'm not sure that those kind of things naturally would arise in most of the classes I teach, but that sounds like they are regular.
Yeah, excellent question. I think if you were to ask maybe my children, they would say that I usually need a decompression, when I get home. And that's why I joke and say, give mom a minute before the refereeing and anything start, right? Because a lot of what I'm teaching lends itself to open discussion. And I recognize that I don't have a traditional teaching style because, I can't recycle my information. Right. So I joke and say, I wish I taught math, not because math is easy, but, you can only recycle the method of statistics so many times. Right. For me, I feel like I'm always learning. I'm always having to revise material. I'm always having to make sure that I'm offering them the most cutting edge, from terminology to approaches to strategies. So they'd have that answer. My support system would say that we're finally, we're excited that people are becoming more aware of what we already know to be true, whether that's in the classroom or not. Mm-hmm. On campus, I think sometimes it can be a very isolating role. I'm also a one person for an entire program and then oversee an internship component. And so there are moments where I'll see the students lining up outside my door that aren't part of my program. And
because they know that they can come to you.
Yes. Yeah. And they know that, what I teach, or maybe they, they're taking sociology and I'll throw a little something in there. And it can be heavy in that way. Or even just a recent example, I was on my way into work and I had to, call our secretary and say, can you let my students know I'm on my way? Somebody's on the side of the road. Yeah. You don't really take that hat off. It doesn't matter if you're in a classroom.
Can't do it.
Yeah, you can't. And I think, so it's, with that said, though, I will say it is by far the most extraordinary privilege that I have. If all of us could think of just collective humanity right now more than ever, especially in academia, especially knowing what so many students are up against, not even making it political, but just times are tough right now. Yeah. If we could all just open up the invitation, doesn't mean they have to take it. Yeah. But that the invitation is there, that's where when a student that I don't even have, if they're coming to me, that lets me know that, I'm pretty privileged because, that they didn't have to, and I hope that maybe something that they walk away with, I'm able to impart that at least I see them. I care about that.
That's so interesting because that is a common trope in everyday discussion we have with everybody about how tough things are now and prices are going up. And certain environments and certain spaces are less welcoming than they may have been at one time. Not to mention something like, say, the regulatory environment of the field in which you work. So how does that make your job easier or tougher? Do you see the overarching statewide or federal regulation or guidance in this field? Has it gotten better for the person working with people, or has it gotten tougher?
It's gotten better in that because I'm part of these state conferences and phone calls, so I'm on them once a month, though that's part of some of the committee work that I do, and then try to integrate into the college when it's appropriate, is that we're seeing more funding now more than ever. I mean, the Office of Mental Health, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Association, they're all the streamlining, they recognize the need. And just to give an example, I mean, a lot of students will talk about better health, right? We see some of these things that are like the catchphrases. But the problem with that is that when you work in the field, Better Health is asking students to pay a $225 fee for those.
Use it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's not a realistic goal, even if it's intended to kind of widen the scope of availability. It's just not realistic. So even though the funding streams are there, if people don't know how to access it, if they don't have the right intermediary advocate to say, hey, I know BetterHelp is on TikTok and all of these things, but let me tell you where you can go and where it won't cost you $1 and where it is. That's where, I think I am seeing where it's beneficial, but it also has to be within the right hands. And in academia, it has to be, enough people have to know about it to be able to let, their students know. And then, as you know, it's cyclical, right? If they're not doing well, you don't see them coming to class. If they're not coming to class, maybe they're too ashamed to tell you that it's either gas or food that day.
Yeah.
These are real life things that people are up against. And I think that is something that, I have a pulse on that I personally relate to, but then I also empathize with, because I think that we're just seeing that in ways we've never seen before historically. It's just been we're under different times right now.
Going back to COVID and when we were all sent home to teach.
Oh, that was a nightmare.
One of the eye-opening things that really I'd never really thought about was students who were once in my classroom on campus in a communal, familiar environment had now gone to wherever they went, right, to try to continue. And one of the things that I picked up on from talking to colleagues was the idea of, when we were teaching exclusively online and on Teams, don't require people to have their camera on because they may not be in a place that they're comfortable showing.
See, Bob, you were being trauma-informed and not even knowing it.
I was. And look, I'm not going to say that I emerged from COVID enlightened, but, there were moments that reminded me that I wasn't teaching in the ivory tower, right? You're teaching where people are and literally trying to meet the students where they were.
Yes.
And it was really tough, and I got to say I didn't like it.
Yeah.
As a teacher,
none of us do, right? Because we go into this, we want the interaction.
It's really eye-opening. It was, and humbling for me.
And see, you weren't knowing that was trauma-informed, and that a trauma-informed professional would have applauded you for that, because what you were essentially doing then was making it invitational and allowing and recognizing without saying it, you're here, and the fact that you showed up at all is enough.
Not going to lie, I was counting the days, hours, months, or years until the pandemic was going to be over and we could go back into the classroom. But like I said, I really did find that instructive in a way, and it was difficult to teach in that way. It is tough to teach in that way, at least it was for me. But one of the good things that may have come out of the pandemic was a sensitivity that I didn't have before, because I didn't have a particularly hard pandemic.
Yeah, yeah.
Went up to the house and clicked in and get food delivered to your door. But it's a reality that so many of us take for granted. So anyway, that's my COVID story and my COVID confession.
Well, let me also just say, too, that I think that one of the areas, going back to even your earlier question that made me think of it when you shared about COVID, is sometimes we don't realize how we dehumanize people. Yeah. And that what brings us together as humans is when we build compassion for my reality may not look like yours, but it doesn't mean I'm exempt. It doesn't mean that it doesn't matter. And I think for a lot of students right now, one of the things that I'm seeing is that their baseline may not be my measurement of success, and it doesn't have to be. It's not designed to be, right? It's like kind of what we know now about testing. Well, what does testing really tell us?
Right.
Some are really good at regurgitating, some are really good at retention and memorization. But it's not the best indicator as to whether or not they're building competencies and they know. And I think that that's something that mental health is teaching us, that you have to change your expectations around it. Otherwise, even in K through 12, it's not just in higher ed, we're really having to look at it's holistic health. What does that look like for people? Mm-hmm. And you can't expect, high academia and then take out whether or not somebody, is he able to sleep? You know what I mean? And they're having insomnia every night. I mean, how do you think they're showing up? At least they showed up. So that's a good way to kind of, so you were doing some of the trauma-informed care stuff without knowing it was called that.
I find myself saying to my students, in most of the classes I teach, and these guys would probably back me up, the people in the room, 70% of life is just showing up. And it doesn't mean you can always do that, but it is a kind of minimum aspiration to try and get there. If you can work past that 70% threshold, just being there, you could find the resources, if you can find the strength, if you have the capacity to do it, I think that's how you can move ahead and get ahead. But it's really just, for a lot of people, just trying to meet that simple threshold. And it's tough.
Yes.
It's tough.
It is tough. But I will say, a lot of people will ask me, why do you stay at Herkimer? Like it's a little bit of a drive, and, they know that on occasion, if I'm asked to consult with another college or something and a certain specialty, part of why I love it here is because I think if we were such a large institution, then even if I want them to all feel seen and heard, I couldn't have the capacity.
Right.
And so I love that if I have 18 students, I know their name, I know their major, or I know what their career goal is. I know if they're a mom. I know if they're caring for a senior. I know if they are struggling because SNAP benefits were just cut. We have so many professors that I believe go that extra mile, and I think that's what sets us apart, and that's, for me, a rewarding piece of the puzzle.
I feel like I've said this a lot in these podcasts when I've spoken with different people. One of the strengths of this place is that it is so small, and that a person who comes here doesn't have to look very far to find somebody who will stop what they're doing and give them their full attention and at least listen, and hopefully be able to direct them to the answer that they're seeking for whatever it is. And it's not always the case at larger institutions.
No, it's not. And I unapologetically share that even with my current students, because, even I'm adjuncting right now at Hamilton, and they're like, oh, you're at Hamilton. I said, oh, please. My loyalty is to Herkimer, but let me tell you, you guys have a lot of more critical thinking skills than you give yourself credit for, but it's a totally different environment. And then to see that we do a lot well.
We do.
We really do.
We really and truly do. It's still teaching and it's still work no matter where it happens, but there is something different and special about our college.
Yeah,
I really truly believe that. And I've stayed here a long time.
Yeah.
Why didn't I get up and leave? Well, there's a variety of reasons, but that's one of them.
Yeah.
I really like it here, and I really like, to the very greatest extent, almost everybody I work with in the city.
Yeah.
And I don't think I would say that if I worked somewhere else. So.
I also love too that, one is you're working with students where there's a lot of students that we have in our classes that I remember being that young kid that just didn't know. I mean, we're asking people to know what you want to do with your life at a time where it's like they don't even know who they are yet, right?
Exactly.
And then you that's coupled with all these, adversities or limitations, or they don't have any guidance, and that's really hard. And then what a great, honor to be in a position where you could potentially see something in them. And then for me, a community college versus maybe a 4-year school is part of our mission, and our core values talk about community, and being a single mom with multiple children, that matters to me, that a college values that in me as well. Like, you got to talk the talk. Do you want just a certain caliber and just a certain demographic, or do you honor the demographic that is also teaching the very, is matching what we have here on campus? And that, to me, the first couple of years, I was paying attention to that. I wanted to know, do I matter as when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, that I may not look the same part, but that my part is equal to what I have to offer. And I have had the administration here, for me, has definitely never made me feel as if that's not commensurate to what I do, the role that I have, or make me any less valuable than maybe a peer who has different circumstances than I do.
The role in the job remains the same no matter who you are, no matter what your background is. Speaking of background, I have to ask you about hip-hop dancing.
Oh, geez.
You knew that was coming.
I did. And there's been some students that don't believe it, and I've had to show them a video because they don't, similar to my kids, there'd be times where they'd be like, no, you didn't, Mom. Yes. Yeah, so I did ballet for 12 years, and again, scholarship, all that kind of stuff. And then as I got right around my teens, started hip hop dancing.
Yeah, because it was the music they were listening to.
Oh,
and it was
100%. Yes, rap and hip hop was what I grew up on. And then, did hip hop in the city for about 6 years. And I'm also a singer. So singing and dancing was my outlet.
Had we known that, this would be a completely different podcast before we started. We knew all that stuff.
I could have just sang all of my answers, Bob.
How does performing equate to what you do in the classroom? Do you perform?
Oh my gosh. I think if you were to probably ask some of my students, we have fun because I would be bored, right? I didn't come from the academia world. I came from expression and I laugh loud. And if you can make me laugh, like we are best friends. It's one of my favorite, talk about mental health and regulation and, strategies and stuff. I always say if we can laugh, and get ourselves through it, it changes everybody's energy in the room. So I think they would probably tell you that I like to have a good time. Otherwise, I would be bored. If I had to just talk at people all day, I probably wouldn't continue doing this.
The Reader's Digest was right. Laughter is the best medicine.
It is.
You know what the Reader's Digest is? I've got a Social Security check to send you.
I know what that is.
Yeah. Grew up on the Reader's Digest.
Yep.
So there it was on my mother's kitchen table. Is there anything else we need to cover today? Is there anything you're dying to get off your chest and tell the world about what you do or anything about this place? Or
we have, so Community Health and Human Services just did another revamp. So in the almost 9 years that I've been here, we've had a couple things because to my earlier point, you can't keep it stale because we're changing and evolving. So wanting to make sure that we have like cutting edge, pathways for students and curriculum. So over the summer, over the past 2 summers, actually, was working with our advisory committee on how we could bring a certificate, knowing that to your questions and to our discussion earlier, the need in mental health, addiction, suicide prevention, all of that is so tremendous. It's for, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has said that it will be the top 3 leading job sector through 2030.
Wow.
So, we were excited about the certificate program coming down, just developed a professional wellness course for students to, beyond just talking about, well, what's wellness and self-care and compassion fatigue and burnout and all these things that even in leadership positions we're seeing across the board. People are seeing it in their workplace culture and climates. Well, what does that look like? How do you do it beyond just saying meditate for 5 minutes? And most people don't have that time anyway. Right. So this gives them an embedded opportunity to really cultivate what they would do and then hopefully model that for individuals and families and communities that they're going to go out and work beside. So a lot of exciting things. There's so many of us here that, I'm humbled by their expertise, and I just think that we have so much to offer that is unlike other institutions. And like I mentioned it, even as recent to a meeting with our president, and said there are colleges that call me and say, we hear you have a trauma-informed care class. We hear you have a partnership. How did you get that? Yeah. And my response is always, nice to hear from you. I'm not giving our sweet sauce. I want it for our folks. So I just...
But to your point, you were seen. Somebody noticed. Somebody saw it and recognized it and saw its value.
Yes. And if that professor didn't pull me aside, I share it often, I probably wouldn't be here. That professor. So I always go back to her. She's since then, passed on. But I even went back to find her. And I remember walking into her office. She knew instantly who I was.
No kidding.
And she called me Gracie. She called me Gracie at the time. There's only 2 people that call me that. Yeah. And the tears started to roll down because she, I guess, had heard about some of the work that I was doing at the time, knew that I was working with adolescents who were on the same path I was. And I had to tell her. I had to say, because of you, look I'm making something of myself.
So interesting, because I think people are confronted every day with those choices or junctions that come to the fork in the road. And the one you take and the one you don't take really matters. And it's
really,
sometimes those little small things, and this obviously wasn't a small thing for you, but it led you to the path that you went on and all the way to here.
Yeah. But she may have thought it was small, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
We may think that just one comment we make is small, and we have no idea the magnitude or where it can land.
The things we say matter. Words matter. They really do.
They do.
Well, hopefully when the spirit of generosity and altruism is behind those words, hopefully good things happen. Mm-hmm. Grace Ashline, I want to thank you for appearing on the podcast with us today.
My pleasure.
It's been great to speak with you. I wish you a great rest of the semester.
Thank you.
Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Stay warm because it's getting cold.
Yeah, it's no.
That's all for the Generally Speaking podcast. Thank you once again for watching, and we'll see you right back here in the studios of WVHC FM next time. See you later.